I just always like to start with I'm a human and I serve humans and I have my own history, my own story. I was becoming more and more miserable with my autoimmune condition. And so it was suggested to go vegetarian, and then I was suggested to go vegan for 3 years, and that almost killed me. And then it's been the last 2 years that I've been able to get off of my medications altogether through going to Carnivore, which has been absolutely revolutionary, not only off my medications, but never having felt better. But all of a sudden, there was this zero carb zen that comes about when you've eliminated the carbohydrates. Just because your mom had an autoimmune condition, or your dad had diabetes, or your grandmother had dementia, doesn't mean you have to as well, right? You can reverse these things. You can prevent them from happening through the choices you put on your plate today.
Welcome, Carrie, here from Healing Humanity. I got my shirt on today, The Power of a Proper Human Diet. And today I'm thankful, grateful, blessed. I'm honored to have Dr. Foren on the channel. Dr. Foren, how are you?
I am super. Thanks for having me.
I'm really looking forward to hearing your story. I came across you on social media, on TikTok, and I love your message. I love the passion. You're getting the word out there to the world, and was hoping to share that with my audience, not just professionally as a doctor, but personally. So maybe if we could start out, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what sort of led you into this carnivore space?
Absolutely. And look, I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for having me, Carrie. I just always like to start with I'm a human and I serve humans and I have my own history, my own story. And so I came from a family that had a lot of autoimmune illness. And I also came from a history of poverty. So I had, if anything, a real work ethic that my only way out of poverty was going to be through hard work, through study, through excelling in academics, and I was grateful that I was able to do those things. My mom instilled in me a real grit and a work ethic and just a phenomenal amount of love. But through my studies, by the time I finished my undergrad, my chemistry degree, my biochem, I was almost through my med school when I was diagnosed with my own autoimmune condition, ulcerative colitis. And ulcerative colitis is a condition where the immune system starts to attack the colon, the large bowel. And so it was very difficult for me as a medical student and then further on in my career to be able to function as I did, to be able to be in an OR room for 3 to 4 hours, because with ulcerative colitis, it involves a lot of frequency. You have to go to the bathroom a lot and urgently. So when I was first diagnosed, I said, look, this is a digestive condition. Perhaps I should alter my diet. And I was told, no, 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 just take the pills. And at that point, I was, one of those rule follower, box checker that they love in med school, right? So I just took the prescription, and it was 5-ASA. And I initially required stronger steroids, prednisone, for over 2 months to get the inflammation down, because my whole colon, I had a pancolitis, my whole colon was involved. But then I went into anesthesiology, which is an acute care specialty involving everybody, we say, from cradle to grave, even before the cradle sometimes, even fetal work. But I look after people in the OR. And in the OR, it can be obviously a rather stressful place. So by the time I was in my 30s, I'd finished my residency. I'd been married. I was starting a family. I had 3 successful pregnancies. And I was up day and night. The place in which I was working was a regional center. So we did a little bit of everything. And we did vascular surgery, obstetrics, lots and lots of ortho, ICU, general surgery, peds, thoracic, you name it.
Quick interruption. Beast Mode Soap sent me this soap, 100% beef tallow, free to try. This is certified grass-fed tallow, never vegan, made in the USA, natural essential oils. We got forest ash, paleo pine. We're in the pine forest. The forest ash is my favorite. I've been using it for a while now. They sent this to me for free, but I liked it so much I agreed to do a paid partnership with them because I believe people need to know what they're putting on their body. And the soap that I had at home is full of chemicals, detergents. Seriously, after I use this soap, my skin feels so soft and so incredible. What you put on your skin ends up in your bloodstream. And I only want to put good things in my body and on my body. And this there couldn't be much better. This is 100% beef tallow. Learn more at beastmodesoap.com.
But it also came with its own physical cost. And so I was still taking my medication, but I was having more and more flares. And by the time I was 40, I was becoming desperate. I had been following what we call Canada's food guide, which is, of course, 6 to 11 servings of grains a day, then with fruits and vegetables and a bit of meat. But between what I was eating, the stress I was experiencing, I was becoming more and more miserable with my autoimmune condition. And so it was suggested to go vegetarian, and then I was suggested to go vegan for 3 years, and that almost killed me. So by the time I was 43, I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll just cut the colon out of me. And at that point, the GI doc I had and still have, he said, why don't you try a specific carbohydrate diet? And so that's tailored to people with autoimmune, with both Crohn's and colitis, to have just specific, less irritable, less inflammatory carbohydrates. So I did that, and within a week, my husband said, whoa, something has changed. You are a different human right now, and you're much more functional. And I couldn't agree more. I was feeling great. But that wasn't the end. That was the beginning, because that ignited a fire in me. He was like, wait a second now. My own profession lied to me. Diet does make a difference, right? And so then I started going down that rabbit hole and just dug into the research. So this was almost 10 years ago, it was 2016. So I quickly transitioned. I said, specific carbohydrates makes a difference. What about, first of all, paleo? So I did that for a couple of months. And then I went low carb. And then it's like, what about even lower carb? So then I went keto. And I did keto for pretty much, 7 years. And then it's been the last 2 years that I've been able to get off of my medications altogether through going to Carnivore, which has been absolutely revolutionary, not only off my medications, but never having felt better, right? So putting on more muscle, being able to lift heavier, do more things than I would have been able to do 20 years ago.
That's incredible. So your colitis, how does it even go? Are you in remission? You don't have it anymore? You feel way better, or?
I have no symptoms. I do eat very carefully. So I try to, and it wasn't just my colitis that got better. I think as many people would experience, I had little bits of eczema here and there, gone. My anxiety, I hadn't ever been, prescribed for anxiety, but I just, it's sometimes a rather anxious profession to be intubating somebody that's 375 pounds all by yourself at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? But all of a sudden, there was this zero carb zen that comes about when you've eliminated the carbohydrates. So there are all these other wonderful things that came about from it. But yeah, as far as my colitis goes, I'm not on anything and I feel great. So I have no symptoms.
Is that pretty unusual? It seems like most people that get colitis, it's just medication the rest of their lives kind of thing.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? And that we're all told that, your condition will be chronic and progressive, right? And that the medications that are out there, part of the reason why I was saying, maybe cut my colon out was because I was truthfully quite scared of the more powerful immunosuppressive and biologic agents, because I didn't like the side effects and consequences, things like lymphoma, or being so vulnerable from an autoimmune, or from an immunity point of view, rather. I intubate people sometimes with infectious diseases. I didn't want to be, immunocompromised and get sick as easily. So, yeah, I think it's brought all sorts of other wonderful things.
It's amazing. Just one last thing on the colitis. Do you feel like, had you not found this, does it just progressively get worse to where you potentially could lose your colon?
Oh, absolutely. And I've certainly looked after many people through the years with ulcerative colitis that have had not only, resections done kind of electively, but people that have to, it could be a life-threatening condition. There's something called toxic megacolon that can happen with ulcerative colitis, and that is a life-threatening condition. And I've taken many people to the OR in their early 20s for toxic megacolon. And if you don't get that colon out now, they probably be dead in 24 hours, right? So you can get very, very sick very quickly.
When we say colitis and autoimmune disorders, it's kind of like your body sort of attacking itself, right? The
Right.
autoimmune disorder.
Yeah.
D Do you feel like that's what the colitis actually was, or was it would you ever have had this if you were eating carnivore your whole life? Do you think you ever would
Oh,
have gotten colitis?
great question. And so I think I probably, because again, I was, this would have been in the kind of mid late 90s. I was, living on my own in a city, going to school. I was just eating as cheaply as I could, right? And also, I'll confess, I was, living pretty large in university. So med school has a bit of a reputation of, you work hard, you party hard, and that wasn't helping either. So was consuming a lot of alcohol. I was consuming a lot of carbohydrates. I really wasn't focusing on protein and fat. So I think had I been carnivore from earlier on, I probably wouldn't have had these symptoms. And I can even think back to times through my life. So like I was born in 1973, all through the 70s and even into the early 80s, our family was very meat focused, right? And I love liver. We'd have liver on a regular basis, and even things like bratwurst and stuff like that. So I loved it, and I was a healthy little kid, right? But again, as we all became corrupted through the food guides and then embraced the pastas and the breads all through the later 80s and 90s, that's when a lot of things start to change. And I saw it in my own mom with her autoimmune condition, with her juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. Her arthritis got far worse when she was eating more carbs. Yeah.
Right. Do you kind of look at the world with a sort of different perspective now that you've found this healing and it's like, man, you were suffering for a long time and it was kind of misguided. It was here's medication, like this is the only solution is medication.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I see, it's kind of like one of those things. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I just look around, the fellow humans around me, and I see the choices that they're making as they're leaving the grocery stores or as they're going into certain restaurants. I just think, if only they knew, right? And it's not my place to come up to them and say, no, please don't hurt yourself with these foods. But I just hope that through even getting the word out on social media to allow people to empower them to know your genes aren't your destiny, right? Just because your mom had an autoimmune condition or your dad had diabetes or your grandmother had dementia doesn't mean you have to as well, right? You can reverse these things. You can prevent them from happening through the choices you put on your plate today, right? And the lifestyle you choose. So by getting up and getting the morning light, getting outside, being active, controlling your thoughts, addressing your mindset, looking at your sleep and your stress, all these wonderful things that are just before us, but we haven't emphasized them.
Absolutely. Your story is so inspiring. I love it, by the way. Because it's similar to mine. I grew up, my parents were divorced, so single family household and very poor and lots of struggling. It's amazing what you've done, what you're doing.
It's kind of you to say. I would say the same of you. So thank you.
Oh, thanks. I also live in Wisconsin. We love bratwurst here too. So one of our
Like
favorites.
my liver pate. I'm like, ooh.
You kind of had a progression with the different diets and going from keto to carnivore. What are
Mm.
your thoughts on keto, I guess, versus carnivore?
Well, yeah, I still try to be keto as a carnivore, right? I don't see they have to be mutually exclusive. And I feel like people have to see what works in their own body. And I appreciate that I have an autoimmune condition. So that certainly puts me in a different kettle altogether, right? So, I found the oxalates and the phytates that they also were quite inflammatory for me. Other people doesn't seem to bother them as much. So I feel like people should eat as diverse a diet as they can and still be metabolically fit. And that's really the key of all of this is how is this affecting our metabolism, right? Because that's all of us. It's our physical health and our mental health is our metabolism. So if people can eat, whatever they want on a keto diet, so long as it's whole foods, I think it's wonderful. But even I, as a carnivore, I find I feel better when I'm more fat focused than protein focused. I do really emphasize the protein, because I do think that, it's key to our metabolic health is to have sufficient muscle. And I feel as a woman that it hasn't been emphasized enough to people of my gender to lift the heavy stuff. There's also, these whispered things of, oh, you don't want to be too bulky. Now, what is bulky? Bulky means you take up space, that you're worthy, that you are, part of the human race, that you should be considered. So that bothers me a little bit. And I've been trying to get bulky here. It's hard, but I do feel like I try to get about 1.5 grams per kilogram at least of protein a day. But I suggest to people, if you can keep it even, like just figure out about 100 grams and work around that, that's huge.
Yeah, I love that. I did keto for years too before I found carnivore, and I don't think I ever would. I'm always just like carnivore is keto. It's just stricter keto. But I don't think I could have wrapped my brain around carnivore had I not been exposed to keto before. I'd have been like, that's just too crazy. You're only going to eat meat. But I understood the science behind it because of keto. My only thing with keto is I felt like after a while, for me, I was trying to sort of moderate my addiction. Like I could have just a little bit of carbs, and then I'd always want more and more and more. And I found myself near the end there just yo-yoing over and over again.
Yeah, and that eating in moderation is complete bullshit. That it does not work, right? So it's like saying to an alcoholic, "Oh, just drink in moderation." No, that's not going to work, right? So one sip can ruin years of good. And I do really enjoy the work of food addiction. So just reading Vera Tarman's book, Food Junkies, right now, I find it's quite interesting, the parallels between alcohol and food. But yeah, I think the more we can eliminate the carbohydrate, then the less addictive patterns all of us will take on. There's so much emotional eating too, right? I was doing a presentation in the spring at a hotel, and I walked past the hotel restaurant, and it had a big neon sign, and it said, "Ice cream solves everything."
Oh,
Yeah. So this is what we're telling our children, right? So ice cream, if you have a problem, ice cream. If
right.
something great happened, ice cream, right? So yeah, the messaging's all around us, right? So, equating joy with food. And it's an easy marketing and easy propaganda tool.
Yeah. The addiction thing, I love what you said there because I think that's a problem for so many people. I know it was for me trying to moderate it. And on carnivore, that's one of the top comments I get on social media. You would have done the same thing if you just ate a balanced diet, just eat in moderation. And there's no other addiction, like you said, that you would moderate. And it's so much harder with food because if I was trying to quit an addiction to alcohol, my loved ones would probably be more helpful, right? You wouldn't go to grandma and grandma wouldn't be like, just have a little shot. You'll be fine. We're celebrating right now. You'd abstain
So
more.
we have supporters or saboteurs, right? And so often when you choose to eat a way that people can see you're thriving on, it almost is a bit of a threat to the way that they're eating. And so then they undermine us and they try to sabotage. Oh, well, just for example, I don't drink alcohol at all, right? But the number of people that say, oh, just have a little sip, right? I don't want it, right? And so I tell people, remember, you don't eat for Aunt Betty. You eat for you. Don't eat for anybody else, right? Aunt Betty has her own issues. You can only deal with your own.
Right.
Mm.
Dr. Foren, filming this documentary, initially it was going to be just about the carnivore diet. And then I interviewed several doctors, good doctors. I say good doctors because these are doctors that are treating the root cause of the problem instead of just giving out medication. But one of the things I learned across these different doctors with different specialties, they all go back to the same thing and they're also passionate about the same thing. And it's a word you mentioned earlier, and that's fixing your metabolic health. I
Mm.
interviewed Dr. Tony Hampton about type 2 diabetes. And when you get to the bottom of it, it's like, you got to fix your metabolic health. I interviewed Dr. Philip Ovedi about heart disease. When you get to the bottom of it, he's so passionate, fix your metabolic health. I started 9 doctors we interviewed, and all of them, that's the same message, is to fix your metabolic health. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. It was interesting to me because I'm not a doctor. I'm just a layman doing YouTube videos. I really didn't know anything about metabolic health before this. The biggest concern I had was I don't want to clog my arteries. I'm going to have a heart attack if I eat fatty meat. And I was oblivious to inflammation, insulin resistance, and metabolic health.
Oh, that, and that's, and I feel like I always say we have to make decisions based on one of two emotions, fear or love. And I feel like so often there's this fear mongering of, oh my God, it's going to cause you a heart attack. It's going to, clog your arteries, as if our arteries were as simply designed as our bathroom sink, right? It is not the case at all, right? So when you look at how our arteries are actually structured, within that inner circle, we have this beautiful lining called endothelium. And in that endothelium, we have something called a glycocalyx. And that is like Teflon. It prevents things from sticking. But we know if you want to ruin your glycocalyx, you want stuff to stick to those arteries, it's not the fat, it's the sugars, certainly nicotine or smoking, high blood pressure, lead is a big one, all these environmental things, but it's the inflammation that affects that glycocalyx, that strips it off. And these are things that I didn't learn in medical school. Even when I went through medical school, nitric oxide was known as endothelial derived relaxation factor. They didn't have a name for it yet. But now we know just how critical it is. It is our most important vasodilator and anticoagulant. And those things are optimized through a carnivore ketogenic approach and through things that we do in our lifestyle, like our oral health. That's another big one I'm trying to get people to look at. So your nose is your organ of respiration. Your mouth is your organ of communication, right? Don't use your mouth when you're working really hard. That in itself increases our nitric oxide. But yeah, I am not worried about LDL. I feel like that is a complete red herring. When we look at things that we can alter in someone's lipid profile, the things that we know are most important, we can't alter with a pill. Your triglycerides, your HDL, we cannot alter those effectively with a pill. But the LDL, which I feel is a more minor consequence of anything at all, that's the only thing we can really move the needle with, and we do that with a statin. So much of the research has been done through statin companies, and they've been over $1 trillion worth of profit for them. So yes, they will continue to push this agenda. But I feel like we need more and more physicians to speak out and to talk about the true causes of atherosclerosis, which are metabolic syndrome, right? And we've known that since 1988. Gerald Reaven said, it's the elevated triglycerides, the low HDL pattern we see with metabolic syndrome that causes atherosclerosis. It mentions nothing of LDL.
Mm. Yeah, it's so important. It's something I'm quite passionate about too. I was on statins, I think, for 10 years in my 30s. And it's hard for me to pinpoint if the side effects were from the statins, but the listed side effects of statins, I had many of, either from those or the many other medications I was on. I'm supposed to get the results any day now, but I recently went in and got my CAC scan.
Oh,
And it was $50 out of pocket. And it took me like 5 minutes. In my head, I've heard other doctors talk about getting a CAC scan before. And in my brain, I'm like, I'm going to have to go to the cardiologist, get a referral. It's probably this big machine. No, it's $50 in 5 minutes. And in retrospect, I wish I would have done that before going on statins for 10 years. Like I could have went in and maybe just big zero, right? Like,
absolutely, right. And so, I really enjoy the work of Dr. Eric Westman, right? And he made that point crystal clear. He said, imagine putting everybody on chemotherapy because we know 1 in 2 people will have a cancer in their lifetime. We don't do that, right? So if you have the disease, then maybe consider a statin. But even that, the longevity effect is minimal, right? So you have to really weigh off, if people are having side effects, it's not worth the longevity effect that you might get from it. And statins are like most drugs. When you look at aspirin that came out in 1899, it came out as a pain reliever, right? And then it was used during the Spanish Civil War as an antipyretic, as a fever reducer, right? But now, why do we use aspirin? The #1 reason around the world, antiplatelet effect. Similarly, when you look at statins, they have a pleiotropic or many effects, and they do certainly reduce the LDL, but that's almost more of a side effect. I think if it has any benefit, it's because it does have a mild elevation in nitric oxide production, does have an ability to stabilize the plaques and to affect the endothelial function as well. So those might be the small benefits, but has true profound side effects. 1 in 50 people will become diabetic from a statin. It'll affect the cholesterol manufacture in our brain. Our brain is our fattest organ. 60% of our brain is fat, 25% of that is cholesterol. Our cholesterol doesn't get into the blood-brain barrier, but the statins do. And those that penetrate more have more cognitive side effects because you're not making the cholesterol you need for this brain, this beautiful organ of ours, to work as it needs to.
It's amazing. This is not scientific at all. I'm just a layman, but that was one of my big things going on carnivore. I feel like fatty meat was demonized for so long. I was eating salad for lunch, salad for dinner, a little bit of chicken breast, and that was it. And it felt like when I ate carnivore, like I was missing out on that fat. My cholesterol went up, but I think I was deficient in it. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. My body was like, yes, this is finally what you needed. My testosterone's doubled on carnivore. My immune system got
Wow.
stronger. My sleep improved. My depression went away. And I feel like so many of those things are hormone related. Like you said, our brain is made of fat and cholesterol. Our hormones need it. So I guess my long-winded question here is, I get a lot of people that tell me, Carrie, you would have done the same thing had you just gotten rid of the junk food. And I feel like that's part, of course, not eating junk food is a big part of the puzzle, but I feel like getting that fatty meat is adding something to it that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
100%. And I feel like it is. It's a species appropriate diet. So, would we feed koala bear, grapefruit? No. They evolved off of eucalyptus. So when you go back to the earliest, when we separated from Australopithecus about 2 million years ago, we were the primates that developed stone tools, started clubbing things and eating meat, right? And certainly we were scavengers at the beginning, but as we evolved through Homo erectus, we started cooking this meat. We started our brains growing even more because of all this protein and fat. But we are the thinkers, Homo sapiens. We are not the biggest predators out there. We don't have the biggest teeth or the biggest nail or are the fastest, but we are the best to think and communicate among each other. So with that, we were able to take down these megafauna. We were able to take out, basically kind of out eat most of the continents in which we inhabited. But all we were eating was meat, right? And lots of protein, lots of fat. It's quite interesting. I even do experiments with my dog. He also eats carnivore. But if I put down a piece of like kind of a lean cut of steak or a blab of butter on the floor, he always goes for the butter, right? He always goes for the fat first because we know instinctively this is what we need for energy. This is what we need to nourish us, right? And I do feel like when I've, even on carnivore, sometimes I'll eat like, a leaner cut of meat and it's just, that's how I always BYOB. I always bring your own butter. I have a little thing of butter I bring with me because, it's just not the same if I don't get enough fat in.
Yeah. It's noticeable for me too. I sleep is improved, mood is better, everything. If I ever feel a little off, I always tell people, if you ever feel a little off on carnivore, reevaluate your fat intake because you're probably not getting enough.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I try to do about a 2 to 1, the fat to protein.
And what does, you kind of touched on a little bit, but I always get this question: what does your general diet look like? Like, what are you eating on a regular basis?
Yeah. So I would say 95% of my diet is beef. So I have beef usually twice a day, but some days, for example, today I worked out, fasted, and then after that I took had 3 eggs and a can of sardines because I do feel like, I do need my omega-3 on a regular basis as well. And I take omega-3 on a daily basis, but then I like to supplement it certainly. But I also like to eat it through my diet. But yeah, I think nothing of having medium ground beef with a couple of eggs or even just hamburger patties at breakfast, and then usually a fatty steak at supper or a fatty roast. I love chuck. So I'll throw chuck roast in the slow cooker and then tear it all up. Awesome. Love it.
Was there a moment after you started carnivore where you were like, whoa, this is a little bit different than anything I've experienced before?
I would say, if anything, certainly my physical benefits, physical and mental, that hands down was the biggest benefit. You know, I'd say from going um, from kind of the standard Canadian diet or standard American diet to changing over to low carb. That was like my biggest transition, like those few months there. But then I would say the second biggest was going from keto to carnivore, because it's kind of like going from gold to platinum status, right? So things just became that much better. Although I gotta say, and I think like many people in the carnivore space, they might find it a little bit exclusionary. People kind of see you as being different. And so that I feel very lucky in that I have a good carnivore community around me, and especially very, very supportive family. And I would say most of my family is they're my meat based for sure. My husband is carnivore with me, but I feel like for people that don't have that support, it must be very challenging.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Dr. Foren, why are you so passionate about this? You're obviously very busy in your professional life, but you're on social media and you're sharing this message with the world, and it's a lot of time doing all this stuff on social media. Why are you so passionate about this?
That's a great question. So, you know, having gone through med school, I was taught a pill for every ill. So, especially in anesthesia, I am the specialty. I am the physician that gives the most drugs in the hospital acutely, right? So, I'm pushing stuff through IVs all the time, right? But my exposure and what I was taught as a student and then working as a physician was that everything was chronic and progressive. Just give a pill and then we will manage the symptoms. But I don't think any of us entered the healing arts in order to do management of disease. We wanted to heal, right? We wanted to make a difference. And so in my life, almost everything I've seen as a specialist is at the end of the line, right? And I'm often inspired by the quote by Archbishop Desmond Tutu that at a certain point we have to stop pulling bodies out of the river. We have to go upstream and keep them from falling in. So, what if I could get somebody before they had severe type 2 diabetes, can't feel their feet anymore, their blood sugars are through the roof? What if they just knew that diabetes is a disease of carbohydrates? Eliminate the carbohydrates, you eliminate the disease. So then I'd start to see people all around me, and I see people at the full spectrum. Some of the saddest anesthetics we give are for people at the end of their metabolic rope, even small children. The number one reason why children have general anesthetics now, number one, dental surgery, to have every tooth in their head pulled out, right? And it breaks my heart to rustle down a 3-year-old to get them off to sleep, put them on a ventilator, intubate them, ventilate them for an hour and a half in order to do a full mouth extraction, right? And that's a little child that did not have to lose all of his or her teeth. And I think of this man, this middle-aged man. He was in his early 50s. It was in the evening. We were getting ready to do emergency surgery on him. We were getting ready to cut off his leg.
Hmm.
And he was in the holding area and he was sobbing. And he said, I never knew my diabetes could do this to me. He didn't think it would be him. And we had to take off that leg because it was gangrenous. And so if I could get this message out that your genes aren't your destiny, your diagnosis is not always your destiny, that you have more power and control than you know, that we've all been misled, physicians and patients. We've all been told to eat this way, and it's made us the sickest humans that have ever walked the earth. So, what if we could empower the humans, give them back their power to choose a species appropriate diet, to choose real food, meat and fats, and heal? Meat is medicine. And this is a reformed vegan. This is someone that spent 3 years eating only plants and almost died from it, right? I was profoundly ill by those 3 years. I was depleted. But it's just, I feel now, after 2 years of just carnivore, this this vitality that I haven't had. I can't remember when.
Wow, that is beautiful. You're getting me tearing up here a little bit. That's
Yeah.
incredible. I'm with you 100% on all of that. It's just so sad that there's so many people that are sicker than ever before, they're hopeless, but they're oblivious. That's the hard part. It would be different if they're like, you know what, I like my cake and my pizza too much. I'm going to keep on with the diabetes. But I feel like the majority of people with type 2 diabetes, for example, they go to the doctor and the doctor, they don't position it as a nutrition thing. It's just, I've talked about this on my channel before. My cousin, he's a couple years older than me. He's type 2 diabetes. Last year, about 2 years ago, I think he lost part of his toe. And then a couple months later, lost his foot. And then we saw him over Christmas and had his leg amputated at the knee.
Yeah.
And he truly believes, like, this is just me. It's a weird genetic fluke. My body just doesn't deal with carbohydrates like other. That's what they told him. They never talked about nutrition with him. And
Yeah.
now, meanwhile, I've interviewed so many people that have completely reversed their type 2 diabetes. And many of them are mad about it. They're like, it wasn't even that hard. Like, it was like a couple weeks and I'm seeing reversal. It's just, it's incredible.
And I would say I felt the same kind of rage actually when in 2016 when I realized the power of diet in my ulcerative colitis. The first thing that came up in my mind, I was pissed off because this could have all been prevented. I
Wow.
could have had, over 25 years of thriving, but I had not. I had this disease. And instead, it was my own specialty that lied to me. But I also forgive. I know that they did not know the difference either. It's been over a century of education for physicians that has wiped out nutrition. I learned in med school about scurvy, beriberi, and pellagra. You know how much of that I've seen?
Right.
But every day I see people suffering from metabolic dysfunction, right? We need to fix their mitochondria. And I don't need to go subcellular on people, but if we can just make a simple message to, of course, break up with the processed foods, but break up with the carbs, right? That they only are linked through insulin resistance. They're linked to every chronic disease. And so if you want to address your chronic diseases, this is the way out. And for those people that aren't willing to, I think we have to look with a lens of compassion because that's someone that's truly living with addiction.
Right.
That is someone that, it is the alcoholic that knows he or she's in liver failure but continues to choose to drink and is pushed to drink, compelled to drink. And it's the same thing for the diabetic that refuses to change his or her diet in the face of amputation because that is their buddy, it's their best friend. And we see it with bariatric surgery. Those people that come in, the day that they have their gastric bypass is the day their best friend is killed, right? That is, they are losing their thing that they've leaned on all these years, their food, their crutch. But slowly, unfortunately, with bariatric surgery, that person often allows more and more of that food in, and then it can ruin the surgical procedure's effect.
Right. Yeah. It's, I'm with you. I used to be so overzealous, excited, like just want everyone. It's just heartbreaking when you see someone like my cousin that won't listen. But I've, in my old age and wisdom, I'm like 2 years on carnivore. I'm like, my wife and I have talked about this quite a bit. I'm like, say it if they have it as a tool in their toolbox. That's all you can do sometimes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, some people aren't going to listen, like you said, or some people have to hit rock bottom. But I take solace in knowing, like, at least if they have this as a tool, because I didn't have this as a tool for so long, and especially with the depression and anxiety that I overcame, I was on so many different medications for depression and anxiety for over a decade,
Uh-huh.
and it was just the nutrition. I would have given anything for this as an option. So putting it out there, that's what my wife and I say now, because my wife's been carnivore for about a year now. She used to make fun of me, Dr. Foren, like, chill already, enough, enough, enough. And now she's doing it. She's like so excited. She's trying to get everyone to do carnivore because she feels so well. But we've come to the conclusion, tell them and then let them. As you say your piece, and then they'll come around eventually, hopefully, if they will. But one thing I wanted to talk about, you mentioned, I have this thing where I attribute so much, like, man, if they were just carnivore, if they were just carnivore. And like you said, with children
Yeah.
losing all their teeth, again,
Yeah.
if they were eating a proper human diet, that would have happened. And you can get into so many things, but a lot of, like, divorces. It's like, how much of that, if these individuals were eating a proper human diet and they weren't, I I've since changed on this because it used to be like carnivore this, carnivore that, but I feel like the problem is that people, when you're metabolically sick, you've got brain fog, you got fatigue. It's literally like us being sick.
Mhm.
Some
Oh,
people more extreme than others, but it's hard to be a good spouse, or it's hard to go out and just hit the gym and exercise because you're sick. It's hard to do so many things in life, and you're making poor decisions because you got brain fog and you're fatigued. So I know I probably over attribute too much to carnivore, but I feel like a lot of the world's problems would be changed if people, not just carnivore, but basically what it is returning to what's kind of ancestrally appropriate or natural.
absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like, and the energy deficit, you're absolutely right. So long as we are living with hyperinsulinemia, too much insulin in our blood as a result of the high carbohydrate diets that we have, I tell people insulin is a fat hoarding dictator, right? So when it's high, it is solely involved with making a fat store that you can't access. It is like a bulldog at your fat, and it will not let you get into that fat store. And instead, when that blood glucose starts to come down, that reactive hypoglycemia, what does your brain say? Your brain says, oh my Lord, your blood sugar is dropping. I'm running out of energy and I can't get at the fat. You better eat again and you better sit down. So the brain does two things. Not only does it drive hunger and make you go eat something, it also protects you from using up too much energy and makes you more lethargic, right? So it's a double-edged sword. So yes, as a partner, that person's not going to be as responsive or as ambitious or maybe help out with the household chores, that they're somebody you have to look after now because they aren't feeling well. So I feel like, yeah, it's interesting when you look at, people that end up getting divorced in middle life, which is also when insulin resistance spikes, right? We know our insulin resistance starts around age 45, and it's younger and younger as we are eating diets that are, again, higher in carbohydrates. I wonder how many of those marriages could have been saved by having two people nourished in a way that we were meant to be.
Yeah. That's been one of the incredible things I learned doing this documentary that was unanticipated. Uh, Whatever the person's sort of success metric was in life, it seems to just double on carnivore. And it's not me overhyping carnivore. It kind of makes sense when you dig into it. But so many people I've interviewed, they're like, I'm so much more successful. I have more energy. I'm making wiser decisions. Your life is kind of a result of the decisions you make. So if you're making wiser decisions, life is probably going to be a little bit better. We interviewed pastors Jimmy and Annette, and they run a church in Texas. And after 1 year on carnivore, their congregation doubled in size. This was after 20 years, 20 years there. It's like, look at that on a chart. What happened here? Well, we went carnivore for a year, and they're like, we had more energy. I was making better decisions. Like, I'm more excited. I'm getting into it more, kind of thing. And I hear that over and over again on carnivore. It's it's weird. Like our title, Healing Humanity, it's kind of an audacious title. It's got many different meanings, but I feel like that's part of it, is not just healing type 2 diabetes, your fatty liver, or depression, but just truly living. Like it seems like all of the carnivores I've talked to, they have this carnivore zen, this carnivore energy. And so many of them say the same thing. I feel like I'm alive for the first time doing this, where I was kind of just a shadow of the human being I was before.
Well, I think you raise an excellent point too, Carrie, is that, I made the point that sometimes carnivore can be isolating, but I think it can also be true community, right? Because then when you get around other like-minded people and everybody's kind of functioning on high octane, then that's when, fireworks, right? So great things come when carnivores get together. And I think what you're doing is fantastic. And I think that the story about the minister is just, it's spot on. And so I think too, there's a quote by Schopenhauer. I can't remember the exact details of it, but there's always things progress through time. At first it's ridiculed, then it's resisted, and then it's accepted as of course, right? And I feel like we are progressing to that of course, right?
Yeah,
But there are so many vested industries that don't want that to happen because
right.
everything from food to pharmaceuticals rests on us making poor food choices. And so I think it's a real act of optimism by saying, to hell with you guys. We are going to eat real food. We're going to make our own food. We don't need you, right? We have about a third of adults that don't know how to cook. And so some people are just truly intimidated by the idea of, how do I cook a steak? How do I boil an egg? So I try to include in some of my videos, like, this is how you boil an egg. This is how you take a frozen piece of meat from the freezer and put it in an air fryer and then get it on your plate in 20 minutes. So just so people will try. But again, I appreciate from a lens of empathy, if people are truly insulin resistant, have very low energy, even just that is so much harder to open up the freezer than it is to call DoorDash, right? We've made it so easy for people to be food addicts at home.
Yeah. Yeah. The incentives, all the incentives are lined up to get us sicker and get us on medication. And then the addiction sort of perpetuates it and it gets worse and worse. But I feel like what you said is true, though. People are starting to open their eyes and hopefully accept this some more. And some of it is just like, well, you mentioned earlier with your colitis. Initially, you said, like, isn't this a digestive thing? Shouldn't we be looking at that? Now it's just like crystal clear, right? Like, and for so many of these other health issues too, type 2 diabetes, shouldn't we
Yeah.
be talking about nutrition instead of medication? When you really take a step back and you see the people that are healing from it, it's just like, duh. I feel like 20 years from now in history, we'll look back and be like, why were we so confused that nutrition was a big part of it?
Especially type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is hyperinsulinemia. They have too much insulin in their blood. So what do? We prescribe more insulin. Why would you give an alcoholic more alcohol?
Right.
And instead, we know when people live with higher levels of insulin, that's when they put on weight. How many people did I prescribe insulin prescriptions to give them insulin, knowing in 6 months' time they're going to come back 20 pounds heavier, right?
Mhm.
Probably eating less, trying to lose weight, but still putting on weight because the insulin is slowing down their metabolism more and more and more.
Right.
Mm.
Dr. Foren, what advice would you give? I have a lot of people that visit my channel and they're curious about carnivore, but they think it's insane. But many of them are suffering. They just can't wrap their brain around eating only meat. What advice would you give to someone that's carnivore curious, but just can't quite wrap their brain around it?
Oh, great question. So, two things. I do feel like, as an animal species, when we look at our three macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fat, we protein is a building block. It's not an energy source, but it's the carbs and the fat. They're our energy source. So we just need to pick a lane, right? So get rid of the carbs and go with the fat. And we crave what we burn. As we become fat burners, we crave the fat. We want that nice fatty strip on the steak. We want that butter. We want that chicken skin. And you crave what you eat. So the more of it you eat, over a couple of days, it does not take long. Like, I'm just even thinking right now of some ground beef. I can feel it in my parotid glands because I love ground beef so much. And make your own meals and make them simple. Literally, take a package of ground beef, throw it in the fry pan, stir it around a little bit, and then put a bunch of salt on it. It doesn't have to be complicated. And I feel like it is so liberating. I used to spend hours a day in the kitchen making meals, washing kale, cutting it up. Now I put a chunk of meat in the fry pan. That's done up in 10 minutes. I've eaten. I'm done 10 minutes later. 20 minutes. That gives me so much more time to go for a walk, go bicycle, communicate with my family, whatever. But it is completely liberating. And so many people spend so much time thinking they're doing the right thing by making these complex kale salads for their family. But they're really trapping themselves in a kitchen where they might not want to be, and they're not actually giving the bioavailable nutrients that the body needs. So eat the meat.
Love it. Uh, one other question I have is, what is the biggest mistake people make when attempting carnivore that leads them to failure?
Oh, hands down. I would say, and I think people know about, as our insulin levels decrease, right? It's high levels of insulin that cause the sodium and water retention. And as we drop our insulin, certainly we are diuretic effect. You lose water, you lose salt. So we all know to avoid the keto flu, you need the salt and the water. But I would say the biggest mistake when people go to carnivore is that they go lean. And Lean, like basically, if you're eating just protein and a little tiny bit of fat, it's super, not only you have no energy source because remember you need either a protein or a fat for energy. So if you're just eating protein or carb rather for energy, so if you're just eating protein, you're going to run out of energy and just tank. But it's also super constipating. A lot of people say, "Oh, I can't go to the bathroom, can't go to the bathroom." Like, if you're eating enough fats, you shouldn't have a problem with this, right? But it's when people eat super lean protein, they're not going to succeed on carnivore. So it takes a while. We are a fat phobic society. People, it's almost visceral that they look at this as it's going to kill me if I eat this piece of butter, if I eat this steak. But no, that is the healing, right? So fat is the magic in the diet. And so more than anything, even when I do videos, I try to show, I eat probably maybe a quarter of a stick of butter a day. So I eat a lot of butter. I eat fatty cuts of meat. And when I do a medium ground beef, I'm usually adding butter to it, and I make sure I get all my tallow, all my fat. I make my own tallow. I make my own skincare. This is the stuff that we were meant to use in our bodies and on our bodies too.
Awesome, good stuff. You kind of answered this already, but I always ask everyone, our documentary's name is Healing Humanity. So, Dr. Foran, does humanity need healing?
Oh, does it ever? Physically and mentally. And I feel like we need connection. And I feel this is a wonderful way to connect not only the dots, but to connect the humans. But the humans need to know that they're suffering right now, and they're suffering physically, they're suffering mentally, and that there is a way out. And just start one meal at a time. Even if you could just do all meat at one meal a day, do that for a week, right? And then start incorporating only meat-based meals for that second meal as well, or eat 3 times a day if you need to. I think some people have got themselves really malnourished, that they don't have enough nutrients. So we need to replenish and heal at the same time.